Most of you here, your job is to find out what the speed limit should be and set a speed limit that's appropriate for the roadway. And I guess our job as police officers is to try and make people adhere to those speed limits, and that quite often is a difficult one. This will just sit here. This is police humor, sorry. If you'd want, I'll go back to them. But as you can see in my slide presentation, that there's three main areas that I came up with. And the first one was capacity. And in capacity, what I was getting at is our capacity as police officers to actually do enforcement. There's a number of things in there. So as individuals, we have a limited capacity as police officers. There's a lot of different thoughts on what our capacity is, but anecdotally, we're looking at about 4 violations per hour that a police officer is capable of doing, and that's taking into account stopping the vehicles, writing the tickets, doing the notes, all the clerical work. Our job as police officers is a lot of paperwork, a lot of court preparation and those things. So for all the tickets that we write, generally you're looking at about a 25% of those will be disputed in court. Out of that, maybe 10% of those people will show up, but us as police officers still have to prepare for those 25%. So I made it go to court for an entire afternoon, 4 or 5 hours, and really only deal with 1 or 2 tickets that I had disputed. It's a very inefficient process for us. We spend, again, a lot of time doing clerical work, putting our tickets into systems so that they can be tracked and things like that. So. The other is we're very often short-staffed as police officers. A lot of us work in the government industries and things like that. Budgets are very tight, and quite often police work or traffic enforcement work really isn't looked at as important, either in municipalities or within our own organization. A lot of traffic officers, there's a lot of inside jokes about our work and what we do, and quite often public aren't very, don't like us that much. Even people who like us at other times, if a traffic policeman's behind you, generally you don't like us. So often we're understaffed and we're mandated to run short, and if in a detachment world or in a municipal world, quite often our members that should be dedicated to doing traffic work are often pulled off to do other things that are deemed more important or more pressing. That often currently has to do with gang conflicts and that going on. So we suffer. There's less of us on the roadway trying to do a very, very big job with the increase in traffic and the increase in people traveling, especially in the Lower Mainland. A lot of people commute to and from work, so there's a huge increase in the number of people on roadways. So the other one I touched on was public perception as another challenge we run into. Again, quite often people don't view traffic enforcement as important. That comes from the public, from the general public, don't find that what we do is important, that maybe we should be doing other things that are more important. Quite often we'll get you should be out catching real criminals. Speeding is still a law in this province, and if you're not abiding by it, you're breaking the law, hence you somewhat are a criminal, I suppose. The other is public often like to justify their own actions when we deal with them in an enforcement side. So they'll be speeding, they know they're speeding, they know it's against the law, yet when I pull them over, well, I'm in a hurry, I'm a professional driver, I drive better when I'm going fast, or what about that guy? What about this guy? You get a lot of that. So people tend to justify their own actions. There's always a reason for them to be doing what they're doing when they're breaking the law, especially when it comes to speeding. And the other is speeding seems to be an acceptable behavior almost. I know some of my colleagues are here, they'll probably see that as well, is that a lot of people think that we have there's an allowable limit to exceeding the speed limit. Aren't I allowed to go 10 over, 20 over? We'll have people, we'll drive by a marked police car going 15 kilometers over the speed limit, and when you pull them over, they're surprised that you're stopping them because they think they're allowed to do that. It's an acceptable behavior, and it's become very commonplace. So the public perception that speeding is actually allowable. And again, it's been touched on by a couple other people, is that speed enforcement, or generally traffic enforcement, is seen as a money grab, that it's not a public safety issue, is we're out there collecting money for the province. But if you looked at how many tickets we can actually write as an enforcement officer, and how much money is spent to have us out there, go to court and all that, the province is not making money off of us. It costs a lot of money for us to be out there, but we're an effective tool, I think. So, and then the last little grouping I had was environmental conditions, and this is where a lot of the people here in the room come into play. Is the design of roadways impacts our ability to do speed enforcement. Quite often the areas that need enforcement are not conducive to traditional enforcement methods using police officers. So roadways that are very narrow, have a lot of turns and curves in them, are one, they're very difficult for us to do traditional enforcement on, either static enforcement or what we would consider roving enforcement, which is us driving around and turning around and pulling people over. To do that on a roadway where people are going 90 or 100 kilometers an hour, there needs to be a significant space of roadway where the people can see us. We've had a number of our colleagues get killed across the country, across North America, doing speed enforcement when they're trying to do U-turns on highways. People don't see us, we don't see them, and we end up getting in collisions trying to do U-turns to go after offenders. So we need places that are safe for us to do enforcement, either stop people on the sides of roadways, pull people off to the side of a roadway, or even just do U-turns. So roadways, again, that are narrow, have a lot of curves, don't have any straightaways, or have a lot of hills in them, are quite difficult for us. So we have a number of those in the province where we have a very difficult time doing enforcement on segments of roadways just based on the design of the roadway. Even here in the Lower Mainland, because of capacity on our roadways and to increase capacity on roadways, some of the roadways have been engineered where they've taken up the shoulder that we would normally use to pull over safely, and that has been turned into a lane for either buses or for high occupancy vehicles. Again, it makes it very difficult for us to do our job because we have nowhere to actually stop the people that are breaking the law. So, and the other would be weather and road conditions. As you saw in some of our slides, there are parts of the province that get snow. So those parts of roadways that do have shoulders when it's clear and sunny out no longer have somewhere where we can safely pull people over because the shoulder is now a snowbank. And it's very difficult for our safety and the public safety for us to take up a lane a traveled lane to stop somebody. So we need places that are safe to do vehicle stops. The other is, again, weather conditions. When it's snowing out, when it's raining heavily, or it's icy out. Again, keeping our safety and public safety in mind. Sometimes it's just not effective for us to be out doing speed enforcement, the traditional style speed enforcement, because it's dangerous. Icy roadways, the last place you want to be is parked on the side of the roadway where everybody slides off. Again, we've had a number of colleagues injured and killed over the years with people going off roadway and crashing into us or into other people. So. And then the last, I threw this in here because us as traffic people, we always like pride ourselves in our vehicles and our ability to do our job. Again, with budgets and things like that, our police cars have become somewhat slower than they used to be. We don't, in Canada and the RCMP, we don't use high performance vehicles anymore, really. To do speed enforcement, we used to have Camaros and Mustangs and things like that. In the US, they use those types of vehicles that have the ability, not so much their high speed ability, but their ability to go from a dead stop to a significant speed to catch up to people. Because the shorter distance that we have to travel at a speed to catch up to somebody, generally the safer it is for us and safer for them. We have vehicles at roadways now, speed limit's 120. It's not uncommon to get people on those roadways traveling 160 plus. Our police cars, although they're capable of traveling those speeds, it takes them a while to get to that velocity. So we're traveling at long distances often to try and catch up to those people. We do have the advent of the radio, and one of our things is you can't outrun a radio, but there has to be somebody on the other end of that radio to help you out. And often we don't have that ability. You're the only one out there, so if you want to catch that guy, you got to catch up to him. So I put that in there. That's another challenge that we run into, is just that ability to sometimes, some of our roadways with the high speeds, it's a little bit of a challenge for us to catch up to them. That is all I had. Again, I shortened it. Being a police officer, the enforcing speed limits and how we do our job is quite, believe it or not, it's quite complicated. There's a lot of different ways we do things and a lot of things that we do. And if I was to explain all those, I'd be up here for quite some time. So hopefully some people have questions when I'm done. And maybe we can...